What I once thought was going to be one of the contenders for Game of the Year has been reduced to a matchup between 1 and 2 Nebraska and a matchup between a 2 and 0, granted, Oklahoma team who's ranked in the top 10. But if you look at them closely and look at the games they've played, they're only ranked, truth be told, in my opinion, in the top 10 because of what they did last year, the overall talent on their roster, not because of any actual efficiency metrics or any impressive in-game play. This Oklahoma team was only beating Kent State by 4 at the half. They had some struggling moments against UTEP. Fillon Gabriel actually has a worse QBR than Casey Thompson does for Nebraska. And don't even get me started on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Losing to Georgia Southern, barely beating North Dakota, and losing in a close game also by 3 points, the same margin of defeat against Georgia Southern, losing by 3 points to Northwestern in Dublin, Ireland. So this matchup here, not as exciting as I thought in the preseason. In the preseason, I had both of these being top 10 teams. At the current moment, I can tell you for a fact I don't even have Nebraska anywhere near my top 25 if I have made one. Oklahoma would definitely not be in the top 10. They probably wouldn't even be in my own top 15. They'd probably be in my top 20, top 25. So a much lower quality matchup than I thought in the preseason. But it's a noon kickoff on Fox at noon Eastern time, so that's going to be 11 a.m. Central time for both the Sooners and the Huskers. It's going to be a good game, in my opinion. It's going to be a good game. I'll just say that right here. And there's potential for Nebraska to win this game as much as there is potential for OU to win this game. Scott Frost has been exposed as the problem. And with him departing, there is a huge possibility that the team could play its best game of the year. They could rally together around new head coach Mickey Joseph, the interim, who has a lot of energy with them. But there's also a chance that, they could further fall flat. Or even if they do have an inspired effort, that OU's roster is just that much better. And OU's staff is pretty good too. And Brent Venables, I'm confident, is better of a head coach than what Scott Frost was at Nebraska. But let's get right into it and start off by, giving you all a game preview. This game will take place, again, at noon Eastern time. It'll air on Fox, and Oklahoma is given a 75.3% chance to win, according to ESPN's Football Power Index. The Sooners are favored by 11. They're favored by 11 points, and they're 2-0. They're 1-1 against the spread. They're minus 420 on the money line. The over-under is set at 64.5. It was just 65 a few minutes ago when I was editing all the slides and such. The Sooners have scored 39 points per game, allowed 8. The Huskers have scored 36 points a game and have allowed 31. The Husker offense, as you can see in my roster preview, I favor Nebraska at quarterback with Casey Thompson, Chubba Purdy, and Logan Smothers over Fillon Gabriel, General Booty, and Davis Bevel. At running back, Anthony Grant by far clears Eric Gray. A.J. Allen probably clears Eric Gray as well. At wide receiver, Oklahoma has Marvin Mims, who'd be the best individual wide receiver, but Nebraska has Trey Palmer, Marcus Washington. You got as well, you have other talented names there too. Alante Brown, for example. Nebraska, I think overall, I would slightly lean to their wide receiver room. Tight end, you have Travis Vokalek and Chris Hickman and others for the Huskers there. I haven't seen necessarily, I will confess, if Vokalek is back and healthy. So if any Nebraska fans want to update me on that, please do. But Nebraska's receiving core and tight end room have seemed to be all in well, even without him. It's been the defense especially that has been having a hard time. And OU in the trenches and on defense and on special teams, I lean there all day, every day. They have one of the best punters in the nation, and I believe his name is Michael Turk. At offensive line, you have Coach Bill Biedenbaugh, who always coaches solid offensive lines, and I just, looking at the Sooners, They're more of a defensive team in general. They're much more of a defensive team than they were last year. Their current leader in sacks is Reggie Grimes, a defensive lineman with 4. He also has 7 total tackles and a forced fumble. Ethan Downs is second in sacks with 1.5, and he has a pass defended and 5 total tackles as well. Oklahoma also does have a solid linebacker room with Danny Stutzman, David Ogwogbu, I think is how you say his name. I probably butchered that. Also Deshaun White, Jaron Kanak, and they have a pretty solid linebacker room for the Sooners, and they also have a good defensive back room. That's an area that could have leaned Nebraska, much like how wide receiver could have leaned Oklahoma, but defensive back, I got to give it to the Sooners here because they've been performing better than the Huskers have in pass defense by far. The Huskers have surrendered, mind you, an average of nearly 300 pass yards per game. The Sooners just a bit over 200. I think that, just looking at all this and then factoring in that it is home field advantage for the Huskers, these two teams are relatively evenly matched, despite the 1-2 record for Nebraska, the 2-0 record versus Oklahoma, and also Oklahoma's they have a heavy talent disparity. They have a heavy talent advantage that favors the Sooners here. And then for Nebraska, offense is the name of the game in modern college football. They're better on offense. They have the home field advantage. Oklahoma, they have the better defense. They have the more talented roster. They also have a better head coach. Mickey Joseph, completely unproven, never even been a coordinator at the Power 5 level. And Brent Venables has been a very successful coordinator at the Power 5 level, and he's coached 2 football games. Mickey Joseph has been the head coach of 0. So a lot of interesting factors that come into play here. It's going to be Oklahoma's first road game, their first game against a Power 5 opponent of the Brent Venables era. This will be by far their best opponent they faced thus far. It's Nebraska's best opponent they faced thus far too. They have home field advantage. They have an interim head coach who seems to be doing a better job of rallying the troops. And I'm just excited for this matchup. This is going to be the first game that I watch. I'm going to closely pay attention to this one, and then Michigan State and Washington tomorrow night. Nebraska is ranked 59th in ESPN's FPI. They started out in the 30s somewhere, and they have just plummeted since then. And it makes sense looking at their defensive performance, and their defense was expected to be a strength of the unit. No. It's one of the least efficient defenses in the country. Oklahoma, in comparison, is number 15 in ESPN's FPI. Both teams are top 25 in talent, observing high school recruiting classes and compiling them with, the team rosters. Nebraska's 24th in that category. Oklahoma is 9th. The Huskers are the 92nd most efficient college football team. That's terrible. They're in the bottom 40 of efficiency. It's absolutely atrocious. The Sooners aren't great. They aren't an efficient team, really. They're 43rd. That's not close to the top 25, but that's much better than Nebraska's 92nd. So both of these teams poorly utilize their talent, and if you watch both of them, you see it. Nebraska, look at all they returned on defense in that linebacker room. Look at what the pieces they brought in the portal on defense, and they've been unable to utilize it. Their special teams, Timmy Bleekrode has missed 2 field goals. Their offensive line hasn't improved one bit. You look at just their overall talent. I mean, they're one of the most talented teams in the West Division. They're like just around where Wisconsin is, and Wisconsin's the most or second most talented with Nebraska in the West. And Wisconsin, it doesn't look like they're going to have a good year either, but in the past, they have been so much more efficient than Nebraska. And Nebraska, losing to Georgia Southern, losing to Northwestern, they surrendered a record in total yards to Georgia Southern, a record for Memorial Stadium. Their game of 214 games where they win if they score 35 points or more, that was snapped. The Huskers are just inefficient on defense by a mile. Their special teams is mediocre. Their offense is above average to good. The Sooners, they have a solid defense. They have solid special teams. I'd say probably a good to great defense, above average special teams, and an average offense, I would say. Maybe a little below average, but They have Fillon Gabriel, Eric Gray, Marvin Mims. I mean, that three-headed duo, or that three-headed trio, it's not necessarily a monster per se, but it is still intimidating. Fillon Gabriel is a solid quarterback. Marvin Mims is an amazing wide receiver. So between these two teams, just previewing them, I mean, again, it's not a high-quality matchup, but the game intrigues me because if Mickey Joseph gets a win here, he's off to a good start. It would be Nebraska's first win against an AP top 10 team in ages. You'd have to go back to the Bo Pelini. Era easily. Perhaps even earlier. Don't know Nebraska football history that well, but it's for sure Bo Pelini era, unless you want to count Mike Riley's faux win against Michigan State in 2015, which I know it counts, but this would be it'd be a big win. And yes, technically, the more I think about it, it would be the first win against a top 10 opponent since 2015 for the Huskers, 7 years later. If Nebraska wins this game, outside of Michigan later in the year, they will not face another top 10 team this season, just looking at their schedule. Maybe Minnesota, just maybe, but I don't think Minnesota will even be ranked in the top 10, even if Minnesota's undefeated entering that game. Minnesota, if they want to be ranked top 10, they have to win all but one or all of their games because their schedule just looks weaker and weaker. But yeah, this game's intriguing to me, and what's even more intriguing to me is the players to watch, honestly. For Oklahoma, running back Eric Gray, the reason it's intriguing for me is because Eric Gray doesn't even have 200 rushing yards. He has 26 rushes, 173 rushing yards, 6.7 yards per carry. He's a senior, 5'10", 211 pounds, and he could double his season rushing total against this Nebraska defense, which on average surrenders 207 rush yards per game. Nebraska surrenders nearly, only 2 yards less in rushing yards to Oklahoma allowing passing yards. That is how bad Nebraska's defense is at stopping the run. Eric Gray, and I know that Oklahoma does use to a certain degree a running back rotation, Eric Gray could get 200 rushing yards, and he could double his current rushing yard total very well. And I think that with Memorial Stadium, it's going to be full, it's going to be loud. Fillon Gabriel might be a little rattled, and Nebraska's pass defense is better than their rush defense. So I think if there's going to be a player for Oklahoma to watch, it's running back Eric Gray. For Nebraska, it's quarterback Casey Thompson. Casey Thompson has overall been solid, and I know that the statistics might not show it. He has the 51st QB rating in the nation, 4 passing touchdowns, 3 passing interceptions, 866 passing yards, which is 3rd in the nation, but he's played an extra game compared to every other team. So that stat is eventually going to go lower and lower. And he so far has a passer rating this season of 146.3, lower than his 154.71 last year. And he has so far played an easier schedule than Texas's total schedule last year. He hasn't faced Oklahoma yet. He hasn't faced Baylor, teams like Iowa State. He's faced Northwestern, North Dakota, and Georgia Southern. Those are the teams that Casey Thompson, Nebraska quarterback, has faced thus far. He also has 4 rushing touchdowns. But I think he's playing pretty well for the offensive line that he has been given. The offensive line is better at pass pro, or about the same, which is terrible, but compared to last year. But Thompson is still doing what he can. He's been sacked 7 times. He's rushed for 11 yards, 4 touchdowns with a long of 14. He can use his legs. More importantly, he has a much better arm than Adrian Martinez, who has been struggling quite mightily at Kansas State. Kansas State and Oklahoma, that will be another intriguing matchup. But quarterback Casey Thompson, running back Eric Gray, those are the players to watch, in my opinion. Eric Gray could double his rushing yard total. Eric Gray also has no rushing touchdowns, and he could get a few, especially seeing how Nebraska will they'll have wide open holes in their defense for running backs to run through and get long touchdown runs on. So Eric Gray, for sure, I expect him to get his first rushing touchdown in this game. That for sure I know. And Jeff Lebby, their OC, is a great OC, and he is definitely going to use every opportunity to take advantage of Nebraska's weak defense, and their defense is much weaker in the realm of stopping the run, and they're also susceptible to big plays, especially on the ground. But through the air, too, as you saw in the Northwestern game, and at times in the Georgia Southern game, when Kyle Van Treese beat Nebraska corners and safeties deep. Casey Thompson has a chance to just light up Oklahoma's defense, which I think their defense is good to great, but Casey Thompson's a good QB. Mark Whipple, all of the leash has been completely let off. And knowing Scott Frost, there was definitely some sort of a leash on Mark Whipple. But Casey Thompson with Anthony Grant and A.J. Allen, Oklahoma's defense isn't just going to be able to have a one-dimensional approach, even with the bad O-line, because of the playmakers that can compensate for the O-line. And you have guys like Trey Palmer, Marcus Washington, others. You even got to see a little bit of Brody Belt and Alante Brown, too, and Oliver Martin as well. So you have a lot of wide receiver options for Casey Thompson to pass to. He can use his legs, too, and he has a solid enough run game to where defenses can't just only focus on him. So look for Casey Thompson and Eric Gray in this game. This comes to my score prediction, and I almost don't like this because an internal part of me says that Nebraska can pull the upset, but I have to think of this in a way where I have to be realistic. I've predicted Nebraska to go 3-0 up until this point, 3-0, and they're 1-2. And here we are. Oklahoma's 2-0. Oklahoma, yes, they struggled against Kent State. Yes, they had weird moments against UTEP, but they haven't struggled to the same degree that Nebraska does. And I think that Nebraska will play a better game than they played against North Dakota, than they played against Georgia Southern. I think they might even play their best game of the season. The problem is Oklahoma is by far the best team they've faced. And Oklahoma, I'm not going to say I know for a fact because they haven't played a road game yet, and they haven't played against a Power 5 opponent yet. It's going to be Brent Venables' first game in those two regards as a head coach. First time playing a Big Ten team, and Nebraska's they haven't fit into the Big Ten in style of play, but, Nebraska players in the Scott Frost era, they're bigger than they were in the Mike Riley era, and we're getting to a point now where with, the staff that Scott Frost has hired, you do wonder that if he was the sole problem, which I think that the amazing staff he hired and the product that was on the field almost proved that, you do wonder if Nebraska is all of a sudden going to come out after he's been canned and they're going to play better for the rest of the year. Not to the point where they'll win the West, even though the West looks wide open, or that they'll be a top 15, top 10 team like I thought, but that they could, have some momentum entering next year, go bowling for the first time in years or something. Nebraska's a huge home field advantage. Casey Thompson and Anthony Grant are going to test the Sooner defense. The defensive ineptitude, unfortunately, is what's going to kill the Huskers, along with Oklahoma's talent advantage. And you do never know. Mickey Joseph seems to be a player's coach. He's already made some staffing moves that I've liked. He hired his assistant or promoted him to full-time wide receivers coach. He moved Eric Chenander, not just being a DC, but also helping out with Travis Fisher in the secondary. These are moves that I like. The problem is he only has 6 days. He's only had 6 days to prepare for this game. Brent Venables, as a head coach, has had much longer time. Brent Venables, there's more staff continuity. When your head coach is fired, yes, there's a chance that, you can rebound and do better, but there's also a chance that your team will just flatline. Absolutely flatline. There is a reality where Nebraska might not win another game or just might win one more or two more games. There's a reality that they could flatline, along with the fact that they could bounce back and cause some chaos in the Big Ten West and with the Oklahoma Sooners. Fillon Gabriel, I think, will be rattled by the stadium. I absolutely think that. It's going to be the biggest environment he's played in his career. And I think that he will make mistakes. I think Casey Thompson will be the better quarterback in this game. But here's the problem for Nebraska and the benefit for Oklahoma. The run game and defense will win OU this game. They will absolutely win it. This is the best defense that Nebraska and their offense have faced. And even though I think that Nebraska is going to score multiple touchdowns on this defense because Mark Whipple and what he is and what Anthony Grant and Casey Thompson are, and I think that they're going to play their best game of the year, Oklahoma's defense is going to do just enough to win them the football game. They're going to make more plays than Nebraska's defense. And OU's run game, that's going to force Nebraska into a shootout where they can't make any mistakes, is what OU's run game will do. Because Oklahoma, outside of maybe Northwestern, probably has the most talented running back duo of any team that Nebraska has faced. And their running backs, I don't think they're more talented than Evan Hull, for example, but Eric Gray with a, I would say, better O-line than what Northwestern has overall, Bill Biedenbaugh, and I just love how Oklahoma's always had solid offensive lines under him, solid to great to even pushing to elite under Bill Biedenbaugh. Very solid O-line coach. That O-line and that run game, they were going to open up hole after hole, tear after tear against the Nebraska Cornhusker defense. Brent Venables will send a message with this win. No, it won't prove that Oklahoma is back to its Lincoln Riley standard of being a playoff contender every year. I think Oklahoma's going to have to do more than that, aka beat Texas, who looks to possibly be finally back, maybe not in the sense of being a contender, but of finally getting back on track to being one in a few years. But Oklahoma's going to send a message that Brent Venables knows how to win on the road, that he is a good coach, and that in year one, he can beat all his non-conference foes, and he can at least prove himself to be a decent coach, which is an important message. It's important to prove that you are competent early on, very early on, at a school like Oklahoma. Look at Marcus Freeman. He's not proving that right now, and it's already costing him. So Brent Venables winning this game would be huge for him in the Sooner program. Thank you all for watching. That's where this video stops. If you're new to the channel or you've been listening to a while and you like it, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this video down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys around. Bye.